So for this week on CyberSchool, we're continuing our segment on demystifying access control. And we're talking about some other ways of gaining entry to a facility. For the past couple sessions, we've just really spoken about, really single button intercoms and that kind of an application. But, that application might not always be right for the particular use case just because of the users that are involved during the process of actually utilizing an intercom. So, thankfully, there are a couple other ways that you can actually take advantage of an access control system and a phone system to actually gain entry. So, we'll talk about those ways today. So, again, just kind of, other ways to entry, really when you're dealing with single button intercoms, it's not always ideal because, say if the main way to get through a doorway is utilizing that single button intercom, that requires somebody to be there to answer the call from the intercom. And say somebody's tied up in, a meeting or, they're not there, it becomes tough to actually utilize that particular doorway. So, by utilizing something like a keypad or an RFID style intercom, it gives you more functionality and it allows users to have the capability, if they're known users that are supposed to be able to get through the doorway, the way to do that without having to involve another person. So it can kind of streamline and make the way a little bit easier to get through, which makes it ideal for main entrances or main thoroughfares into or out of a building. That might be used by more than say just employees or regular people at a particular location, but it might also be used by patrons or visitors to a particular location. And we'll talk about two particular use case styles today, but both of them are going to have relatively similar security, really just different ways of actually gaining access to the facility. First and foremost, we'll talk about keypad-based access control. This is definitely a super common way to gain access through a doorway, and I would say probably the most popular when we're dealing with other ways of gaining access by using an intercom. And that's by using, of course, a keypad intercom. And with the more buttons, as I always like to say, more buttons means you can do more things because you can press more buttons. So with a keypad entry, it allows the capability for security codes. And security codes are going to be entered on the physical keypad, which gives the capability to assign up to 500 different users a time-sensitive code that they can actually enter on the keypad. So that way I can have a code that's only valid for very specific times, and you can have a code that's valid at completely different times that's a completely different code. Everybody gets a unique code. So that way you can go and issue these to all the different people that will be known to be using this particular doorway and, time gate them appropriately. So that way, say my code is only valid 8 through 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and maybe your code is valid all the time, or maybe only on the weekends, and so on and so forth. So that way you can restrict access to time zone or really time periods that somebody should only be able to access through. And the nice thing by utilizing a keypad for this actual entry, you really don't need any assistance from another user. Once the codes are set up, say for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you just walk up, you enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the keypad, and assuming it's the correct time and the correct day of the week that code is supposed to work, the door opens, the door is unlocked, and you can gain access through the facility, which makes it really, really easy. And then, in times of, potential a lot of people coming through a particular doorway, or, say an after hours for, say, like a split shift or an evening shift, or, somebody coming in after hours, it gives you that capability to be able to get through that doorway without needing to make a call from an intercom and have somebody, do the proverbial buzz you in. So then we get into RFID-based access control. And this works in basically a very similar function. And instead of having to remember a key code that you enter, you have a key card in the form of an RFID card or tag. The nice thing is this is all integrated into an actual intercom-based system. So you have that same capability built into an all-in-one style unit. So that way you don't have to have a separate intercom and then say, a whole separate network run for, a different RFID tag reader. So, it simplifies the installation and makes it look a lot cleaner on the exterior of the building. And instead of having, your intercom here, your card reader there, you've got a single box that does both. So it provides you that big capability there. And a nice selling point to, CyberData's variant of RFID-based access control is we use a high level of security for our cards as compared to other styles of cards in the industry, where most other cards just basically have a series of numbers, sometimes some letters printed on the card, and you enter that in, and that's basically the code used for the card. Our cards are actually programmed to use, and they're associated with a very specific reader. So that way they're a little bit more secure as compared to others that you run into in the industry. They take a little bit longer to set up because of that security, but it makes them very, very up to date and kind of bleeding edge in terms of security capability for RFID cards. And when you're dealing with RFID cards, they have the same unique time sensitivity that you got with the keypad code entry capability. So that way, whether if you'd rather assign people, say a specific number that they use to gain access through a particular keypad, or if you want to give them cards or tags, they can just simply wave that card or tag up against the reader and be able to get through it. So in that same manner that, my card is only valid Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and your card is valid on the weekends. The thing that's a little different with our RFID tag readers is they're going to be close read style, which actually does mean that you have to physically contact the reader with the card or the tag, and they're not the cool kind of, super far read where you basically just have it in your pocket and it unlocks for you. We're not that fancy. We like the better security of actually having to come in physical contact with the reader and the card to actually be able to get the read out there. And that's just kind of a different style for use case when you're using one of these things. So the nice thing for both of these different options is it really streamlines the way to actually gain access through main entrances. And that's, of course, by utilizing the key codes or the RFID cards for that access capability. And the way that this streamlines this is it gives the employees the capability and kind of the liberty to go through the doorway if they're granted access to it. And they don't need to say, press the intercom and call and talk to somebody, and they can just utilize the intercom in kind of a faster fashion. So, say it's a lunch break and everybody kind of goes out, they're sitting in their cars and having lunch, or if there's a picnic bench outside and they're ready to come back in, instead of having to have the secretary there that has to take their lunch break at their desk, so that way they can buzz everybody back in. Everybody just scans their cards or enters their key codes to be able to get back into the building and get back to work, which makes it a lot quicker for everybody to get through and lessens the workload because it doesn't require somebody around to go and answer the call. But the nice thing that both of these options provide is they're integrated with a standard intercom. So people that aren't normally there at the building, say your visitor, your patron, your friendly neighborhood UPS guy, they can still utilize that same call button where you walk up to the intercom, you press the call button, it calls that predetermined number and somebody can answer, and then they can grant access. So you're combining that kind of capability where you've got kind of a streamlined way to gain access by people that normally should be going through that doorway, and then your visitors, your patrons, what have you, can utilize the intercom and still get that same access capability through there. So it makes everything a lot more streamlined, and you can do it a whole bunch quicker. And then when you're dealing with security as, a big point for these particular products, security is, something that we thought of first and foremost. And the nice thing with either option, they're both going to be time and day of the week sensitive. So that way, in the kind of example that I gave, my card is only valid Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, but you can set very specific ranges where, say, the card is only active on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 10 and 2, or, what have you. You have that kind of capability and that granularity to restrict when a card is going to be active. And another nice thing with these units is they're all kind of on-box style units. Instead of needing to have this unit and then some kind of a server that handles all the processing capability, everything is done on board. And as such, it has an onboard access list. So that way, anytime that a card was used, whether it was valid or not valid, it's going to be logged in that access list. So that way you can see if somebody tried to gain access when they might not have been, or, say if you have, some kind of a break-in, you can check and and see what what cards or key codes were used at a particular time to be able to narrow down which particular user might have, say, had their card leaked or their code leaked, to be able to really kind of track down, that potential security vulnerability. And then finally, we've got something that we've implemented that we call a blacklist. And, say when you're doing the kind of code or card control, and say, somebody leaves the business, they're no longer working there, you can, of course, just delete their code or, their key card and be on your merry way, and, their stuff won't work because it's no longer entered in the system. But sometimes it might be better to actually go and blacklist that particular user, whether it's their code or their card. And when you blacklist a user, it will have the device actually generate either a SIP message so it can make a phone call or multicast out to the local area network on that code actually being entered, or the card being read. So that way, say if you have a disgruntled employee that was fired and you weren't able to collect their cards, or you were using a key code and they're a little disgruntled, you just want to be safe, for a couple of weeks, just keep them on the blacklist. Well, if they come back up and try to gain access to the facility, the intercom is going to let you know by that kind of capability. And you can be discreet by sending out a SIP message. You can be not discreet and send out a multicast message and do a huge broadcast that somebody's trying to gain access through a particular intercom, or you can do a combination of both, just so that way everybody knows that there's a blacklist entry that was entered into a particular device. So these things are very, very secure and provide a high level of capability, which would kind of be expected when you're dealing with this kind of an advanced access control style system. And then finally, to kind of tie everything together, when you're dealing with your single button intercoms, they really do require two people. It's that old adage of, it takes two people to tango. When you're dealing with a single button intercom, you need somebody that's there at the intercom that presses the button, but you also need somebody to actually answer the call from the intercom to gain access. And that, just needing two people for that really kind of ties a single person up to deal with that kind of capability, especially when you look at it at scale for a main entrance point to a building. So that way, a different form of access control can be very, very powerful and very capable for that kind of a location. And that's where these keypad and RFID style units can come in. And when you're dealing with another way of access control, like you would get from one of these, you really do want them to be secure. So you want some way to be able to maintain and track how many users were through there. And, if for some reason somebody tried to gain access that wasn't supposed to be, since these things are tied into your phone system, you can go and have a blacklisted message actually sent out, which really combines the security capability and leverages the phone system. So that way you're really taking advantage of two traditionally separate systems and combining them together. And this gives you the capability with all of this stuff put together to really to streamline the door usage of the door by your employees, your patrons, what have you. Anybody that would need to use the door has some kind of capability to do it, and really the fastest manner possible. Your employees can enter their key code or scan their key card and be on their merry way, and your visitors and your patrons can go through the standard process of using an intercom. So it really, really makes the process a whole lot faster, and this makes this absolutely ideal when you're dealing with main entrances or main thoroughfares into a particular building.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.